Greetings, conservatives. This is your humble host, John Moraga, and we are back with more ConservaCast. We look forward to keeping you informed with the latest and most relevant commentary of conservative issues. So without further ado, here are a few topics I'd like to discuss.
Population control, hope, and my beard. Now, I want to begin by addressing the more serious topic of population control. But I do want to kind of end on a lighter note and give you an update on my beard. But that in a few moments. The idea and concept of population control, I don't think has been discussed by many people thus far, especially among conservatives. That doesn't mean that it hasn't. I just am not aware of it. Maybe I'm not listening to the right people or listening to their specific addressing of population control. But I want to address it in my own way and just give my thoughts on that. Now, at the time of the production of this specific ConservaCast, we are in the midst of the coronavirus and rioting, i.e., protests around the country and actually around the world, more protests around the world. But before the actual protests and rioting began, we were in the height of the coronavirus for the last few months. And during that time, initially, there was a pretty across-the-board understanding that it was, in fact, a health crisis. There was some concern among the left and the right. It wasn't politically divisive in the offset of it. Now, obviously, there was some time of what is known in the military fog of war. And it's not a direct parallel, but it gives some kind of context. We didn't have all of the information, and technically we still don't, but there was the initial presentation to the nation, to America, to say, wow, this is something that has come from China. However, it may have come, whether it was intentional, whether it was conspiratorial, whether it was accidental, whatever the case, we are now experiencing a mass threat to our health system. And so whether you were Republican, Democrat, conservative, liberal, there was an understanding at least, whoa, okay, we should probably take this a little bit more seriously than just paranoia. As time progressed, there were differing opinions on how dangerous it was, on what type of precautions we should take. Initially, President Trump did not shut down the country, did not prevent things from going on as normal. And a few days or weeks after the initial presentation of it, he did start to shut down travel, shut down services in response. Not only did he, but governors started to take precautions and shut things down. The first among them was California. No surprise. But California took the first steps to basically say, we're shutting this baby down. No going out, no services, nothing. We all just need to lock down. Okay, it raised some red flags. Whoa, this is something very serious. The partisanship of Newsom being a Democrat was kind of overlooked to say, okay, well, maybe there's some cost to this. We'll kind of look the other way. And it was kind of reinforced by him having a working relationship with President Trump to say, okay, maybe they can put their differences aside and work towards something that goes across party lines, goes across ideological beliefs. They're trying to address something and work together. Now, obviously, if you saw the news and the bias of that, they were trying to constantly knock President Trump down about how many ventilators he had out there, how many masks were available, how much inventory was available, the response to these things. It's a little curious that now, in June, that has kind of now been forgotten. I'll get to that in just a moment. But the understanding was there was an objective threat. There was something that was going on that needed to be addressed, irrespective of your party affiliation or your ideological tendencies. Now, I sat back and I thought, like many people, okay, maybe there's some legitimacy to this. But looking further into the numbers, even at the earliest stages, it was curious to me. These numbers are not as dangerous as car accidents, other types of causes of ailment or death or harm. We're shutting down the entire country. We're actually shutting down the entire world, other nations. Okay, how about a very bad flu season? Do we shut the country down for that? Now, understanding the concern was that it might become worse than the flu. All of this paranoia and fear was based on what might happen. Not what was happening, but what might happen. What was projected based on certain numbers, studies, professionals in their respective fields. All of the measures that were taken, all of the directives that were given, were based on hypotheticals. What could potentially cause millions of people to die if we didn't adhere to these things? Now, because I am a little bit, well, probably more than a little bit, but I am skeptical of government control. I am suspicious of those in power, as I believe many Americans are across the board, but especially conservatives, especially those who believe in freedom and liberty and wanting to protect our Constitution. In the 21st century, there is great cause to be concerned of those who are in power. And so I started thinking about this. Whether or not I became a conspiracy theorist, as some would label me, or go to an extreme, I started thinking this is becoming very reminiscent of an experimentation of population control. How can the government most effectively control the population on a mass level, not just in little communities, not just in certain areas or regions to give propaganda, to have an onslaught of political ideologies and force it into the news feed, whether in cities or counties or states, but on a mass level across the country, blue states, red states, conservative counties, and liberal counties. In the initial phases, there was across the board the attempt to give directives to say, whoa, we got to put the brakes on this, people. We got to take measures. We got to take precautions. Now, admittedly, that was kind of short-lived among certain red or conservative states or regions, in particular, even Florida, a big state, but they did not fall for a lot of the intense population control measures that were advised. For a short time, there were some, but to the level that they were able to weather the storm, they didn't fall for that in a long term or on a massive scale. Now, that's for another topic, another discussion. My point is just that, at least initially, there was a massive movement to control the population of the United States of America. What would it take to convince people that they should change their way of life, that they should alter the way that they conduct their business, schools, hospitals, shopping malls? We shut down the entire economy. We shut down the school systems. My children were not able to have the same types of, as millions of other Americans, were not able to have the same type of education that they were used to being afforded, public or private. Everything was shut down. Wearing masks, wiping our hands with alcohol sanitation, and not getting packages from deliveries, and just all kinds of mass confusion and information about what we should do, how we should conduct ourselves. Now, whether there was some legitimacy to this is something to consider. But I think on the bigger picture, there were social scientists, political operatives, who understood that at the very least, whether or not this was legitimate, this is something to be studied. This is something to look at in retrospect, to take note of. Now, folks, this isn't just some kind of paranoia, oh, there are people out to get us. No. There are fields of study, social sciences, social psychology, This is nothing new to many of you, but for those of you who aren't aware, these are actual fields of study that are given degrees in colleges and universities to say, go out there, write your thesis on these types of studies. Master's, graduate programs, PhD programs, people who are employed by the actual government, by big businesses, marketers. How do people respond to certain stimuli? What does it take for people to act a certain way in order for them to have a response and for us to have a certain outcome to either generate more money, for us to acquire more power, whatever the cause? This is what I'm saying is an attempt to look at population control. Whether that term is a trigger term or whether it's used for nefarious reasons or just for business purposes, it's still a realistic field of study that is employed by businesses and government officials the same. And you better believe that the response to COVID-19, the coronavirus, is just fodder for these people. It is just, they eat it up. How do certain states respond? How do certain regions, counties, how do ethnicities respond? Are there certain differences between Black people, white people, Hispanic people, Asian people, men, women? Who's affected by this and who responds accordingly? This isn't paranoia, folks. This isn't conspiracy. This is objective observation. Now, as I said, I have not heard many people talk about this in depth among conservative circles. That doesn't mean that they aren't out there, as I said. They very well could be. I'm just not aware of them. But even if there are, at the very least, I want to reinforce this concern. Because it isn't just COVID-19 or the coronavirus. I'm going to talk about what's actually happening with the rioters. But I want to close out and full circle that concept of the coronavirus. Before the riots started happening, we were looking at certain states, particularly in California. We're going to stage 1, where everything is shut down. Phase 2, a little bit of reopening for certain things. Phase 2.5, so to speak, where there's a little bit more opening of certain businesses, certain types of movement of travel. Phase 3, which was supposed to have been churches or certain types of salons or gyms or things. We're going in phases. And then phase 4 would ideally be everything was essentially reopened again and we return to some type of normalcy. Interestingly, among those, and this is a whole other topic that I probably won't talk about at this point, but churches, places of worship, were not included among the early stages of reopening, but now they kind of are. My place of worship, my home congregation, has just recently reopened in this past few days. And thankfully, we are able to reconvene. But even there, out of trying to be accommodating, there are still some restrictions. Many people with masks, social distancing. One pew has to be vacant so that there's every other pew is able to be attended and people can sit on every other pew. I mean, it's, as I said, I don't want to get distracted on that. My point is just that there are measures that the state is still trying to implement to see, will you obey by this? Will you go to your church? Will you go to your congregation that technically can't have more than 100 people or 25% capacity for the first week or 2 or 3? There's a whole bombshell of religious freedom and freedom of expression, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly that I could talk about at length. But I'm just trying to talk about population control specifically. This is, I believe, whether it started out as this or whether it has become this, I believe, has been an experiment of population control by the powers that be, whether it's big business or the government, or both, or whatever the case is. That's not to say we should be paranoid or live in fear. It's to say that we should be aware. What is the state trying to accomplish and what information are they trying to gather? Now, ironically, Ironically, I emphasize the irony in this because just after places started to reopen and there was the ability to try and get back to some type of slow normalcy, we had the incident of George Floyd, to which there was a response that I'm sure all of you are aware of unless you've been living under a rock. Now, the actual incident itself and the actual injustice of things, again, could be an area that I would address in length and in depth. I don't want to do it a disservice at this point. I may address it later. But I want to talk about something that happened in the aftermath of that, which is, as many of you may know, or all of you may know, the protests. In other words, also the riots that occurred. Now, I know I'm not the first and only one to say this, as I am aware that there are many others, conservatives and others, who have made the observation that isn't it strange that there was this whole lockdown, this whole mass social lockdown for COVID, but yet there's no enforcement of these rioters getting together. And the most absurd thing is that they're all wearing these masks, which in and of themselves, even the experts, Fauci, others who would say it's not the masks that are helping to deter the spread of this, it's the social distancing. So when you see all these news reports and these pictures and video of people wearing masks, yet they're right up against each other, and they're all crowded into each other, hundreds or thousands of people, it defeats the purpose. In fact, it's counterproductive, and I want to get to that. The actual move for people to start wearing masks, I have always thought was ridiculous. Scientifically, physicians will tell you that even the best of masks, the N95, only prevent up to a certain amount of bacteria or viruses or spreading of things to come in. And even then, they're usually only effective if you don't touch your masks and you have other precautions where you have gloves, you're in a sterile room, they use them for surgery, they use them for certain things. But the vast majority of masks, whether they're actually purchased or homemade, have no effect on the actual spread of COVID. It's a psychological trick. Again, population control. It's something that makes the individual or groups of individuals feel, oh, well, I'm preventing. No. In and of themselves, they do not prevent these small microbes of things getting into the mask. But beyond that, the average person doesn't realize you're not supposed to touch your mask. You make it essentially ineffective when you touch your mask and you allow all these germs to sit on it. And again, I don't want to get into a tangent on that. My point is, you see these pictures on the news of people rioting, protesting with masks, yet they're right up on each other. They're touching each other. They're in hundreds or thousands. Do you think that's supposed to be preventing COVID? Where's the enforcement of that? Again, I know I'm not the first one to make this observation, but just to bring home that point, it's ridiculous that now after all this time of one effort of population control, they're now not even adhering to it. But one area that I do want to address that is population control with these protests and rioters is the law enforcement response to what's happened. Now, I want to put out there a caveat and a little asterisk. I wanted to start off by saying, please, President Trump, fight back. We were going to name this ConservaCast President Trump Fight Back, because my initial impulse was to say, you know what? Forget these rioters. Forget the bad press. Forget the political correctness. We need to crack down. Get the National Guard. Get the active duty military. I was active duty military, hard to believe, a couple decades ago. But my actual career field was security forces For those of you who don't know, I was in the Air Force. And for those of you who aren't familiar, security forces are essentially a military police and then some. We were trained in anti-terrorism, law enforcement, all these types of things to maintain order. And we actually had certain exercises and even real world situations where we had to attend. But I could see myself in that position being deployed to Washington, D.C., being called up to attend to these certain things. Because first and foremost, we are a nation of law and order. Controversial or not, if the mob, and that's what I call them, that's what others have called them, and rightfully so, the mob is going to try and gain power and undermine our way of life, that by all means, I am a hawk in that situation. Take the police, the National Guard, active duty military, whatever is necessary, fight back. Now, that, as I said, was my initial impulse. That's what I thought, okay, we need to do this. And for the most part, I still do. I still do think that President Trump should take whatever means necessary to quell and quash what's going on. However, this is an important however, an asterisk. This may upset some conservatives, or some of you may understand what I'm talking about. But let's put on our thinking caps now. Let's put on our objective hats. As conservatives, we also need to look at the flip side. What happens if we get behind President Trump or others in power, governors, mayors, to unleash the full arm of law enforcement, military, government power, to subdue these rioters? What happens come the time, God forbid, that it's conservatives who rise up? It's law-abiding Second Amendment advocates who are well armed to stand up against the government. God forbid it happen. In an abuse of power, martial law, to enforce something. If there is a liberal president who decides to, on a whim, go after the Second Amendment advocates and say, okay, we now need to crack down. I don't want to even imagine what would happen in that sense. But this is also something to consider as a means of population control. In this situation, yes, admittedly, I am biased that I would want, and I do want, for President Trump, for mayors, for governors to exercise the full length and the full arm of rule and law and order. But what happens on the flip side? What if there is a situation where conservatives have said, we are fed up? Now, I want to put in context, I do not believe that conservatives would act the way that these rioters are. I put that out there to say, no, I understand that we would not respond in a way that just out of being ill-informed and passionate and just impulsive, that we would be taken over by a well-funded Antifa movement or an organization or operatives who are essentially paying these people. They're not even really rioting out of injustice as much as they are just the mob. But if it does come to the point where conservatives finally have to stand up, finally have to take on an all powerful government that is trying to and attempting to implement martial law, how do we respond? What precedent are we setting if we say enact the entire full arm of the military to quell the uprising that's happening? It's a very hard situation to be in because I think this is also something that social scientists, social psychologists, business professionals, political activists are looking at. How do we control the population? What means are necessary in order to take on this movement? Now, it's not so clear to say that COVID, the coronavirus, is an exercise of population control for the left, for the liberals. And law enforcement to quell the riots of things is a population control experiment of the right. I don't want to make it so simple as, well, left and right, conservative, liberal, and as a whole. I think these two major situations that are going on right now are very much an attempt to understand how to control the population, the masses, on a small scale in cities, on a massive scale in states and regions, different areas of the country. Again, I don't want to encourage people to live in fear and paranoia that the government is coming after us in one way or another. On the contrary, this actually leads me to the next point that I want to talk about. Hope. 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 I want to emphasize and reinforce hope. Now, for those of you who have seen some of my previous ConservaCasts and understand where Conservatives' Corner falls down on the three pillars of conservatism, biblical precedent, natural law, and federalism, biblical precedent being one of the, if not the core of this, I've said many times, and I don't mean to be redundant, but I do want to reinforce that for many conservatives, if not most, I would imagine, from my experience, I believe most conservatives are God-fearing. There's an understanding that our ethics, our morality, our truth, our sense of right and wrong and sanity and what makes us whole lies with God, in our relationship with Him, not among a secular government or secular politics. And so I think there is a need to really reinforce that. Whether you are somebody who claims to be Christian or born again and have an actual relationship with Christ and walk in a very passionate, zealous life with God, or whether you may happen to be an Orthodox Jew or somebody who at least has some understanding of God. It's imperative that we draw to that. Now, obviously, I'm biased in what my beliefs are, and there's a whole other ministry, noslogos.org. noslogos.org that I've started, and for those of you who know, I've talked about that in a different ConservaCast. But that aside, on a practical level in our secular society, there is an understanding that we do not need to live in fear of what the secular world around us tries to impose on us. We should not live in paranoia, being scared, in fear, even though there is a real reason that we might think we should. Job loss is a huge one. Unemployment has been a big one. Now, granted, there's been some new numbers that have come out with the unemployment rate, but still, it is still an issue. It is still something that people suffer with. Even if they started to get their jobs back or started to get employment back, there's a time of needing to recover, recoup the losses that are there. Not only that, but what's actually, I believe, even led to some of these riots, people who have been out of school, because the schools have been shut down. A lot of these people are young, people who have been out of jobs, and the directive to wear masks. This leads to a formula for riots. If you have no job, you're not going to school, you're forced to wear a mask to cover your identity. You couldn't predict a much ideal calculation for there to be criminal activity to happen. There is a sense of psychological distress. Finances aside, I know from my own personal experience with my family, with my children, hearing it from my children. Why can't we go to services? Why can't we go to school? Why can't I see some of my friends as often as I used to? And it plays on our psychology. But folks, there is hope. There is a place of refuge. As I said, whether you're God-fearing in even a nominal sense, or whether you do have an understanding of who God is and a very active relationship with who He is. Again, please see noslogos.org, and I would love for you to find some material there, and I encourage you to do that. But I do want to encourage you to seek after God and not be so overwhelmed with what's going on around you in our society. It can seem very, very, very hopeless. I get that. And even for somebody who does believe in the Lord and have a working relationship with God, it still has a very tumultuous feeling, which is all the more reason, as I said, I encourage you to seek after that hope. And know that we are not just of this world, and whatever happens around us should have to be the be-all, end-all of our existence. And I think once you come to that realization and you have that understanding of hope, some of that stress, some of that overwhelming feeling starts to subside. Things start to make more sense. Things start to seem a lot less negative, pessimistic rather. And now, especially as churches and places of worship start to open up again, please go back. Please go support your local congregation, your home congregation. By all means, go encourage people. Give your donations, your tithing to these people that need your support. There is hope beyond the secular government and the workings of the secular government around us. Now, lastly, on a little bit of a lighter note, my beard. Now, in a previous ConservaCast, I was talking about growing my beard out longer and the beginning stages of my beard, and hopefully some of you can laugh at me or laugh at yourselves, just kind of making this a little bit of a lighter note and ending on that. My beard has now been growing out for a few months, and my wife initially did not like it. We actually invested in some beard maintenance products, care products, whatever you want to call them, some oils, some balm, comb, brush, and I think, if I do say so myself, it's started to come in a bit nicer. I did not cut it. As I said the last time, I was advised not to cut it. It's a lot longer than even my wife thought it might be, because for a while there, I was just letting all these little tangles spread out, and I am about to trim it. I think I want to get some trimming down here, a little bit here, get little clippers and stuff. But for those of you who have tried to grow a beard, from all the research that I've done from other podcasts or other videos, other articles, the biggest thing, do not cut it within the first 30 days. And I would say even within the first 45 to 60 days. A patchy beard is inevitable. Now, again, from the research that I've done, genetics are going to be the primary thing that will determine the type of beard that you will have. But beyond that, some things like your diet, your exercise, your health will play a factor into that. But also some of the care that's been given into it. Oils, balm, combing, maintaining it. We'll see where I'm at in another month or two, especially after I trim some of this stuff. But I like it. It's now become a part of me. It's now become really a part of what I look at in the mirror, obviously here. But some of you may not like beards. Some of you might. And some of those of you who have tried to grow a beard within the first 30 days may say, oh, it's a patchy beard. I only have some here, I only have some here, I only can do this or that. That is normal. Even for the most full beards, those people who can really grow, and I can't, but even for the most full beard, even they have patches to them. It's a little deceptive because you can comb over, you can get things to make it look a little thicker, but I guarantee you a patchy beard is normal. What makes it less patchy, what makes it a little bit more manageable, is if you do let it grow out and comb your hairs into it, give some balm into it, stipulating that your genetics allow for it. But the majority of men can grow a fuller beard than what they think. Now, my wife is still kind of teetering on things. She has grown to like it a little bit more now that I can manage it and maintain it. And I'm about to take some clippers to this. I just wanted it to grow out to a length that after some time, if I do trim it, it won't look as short or as, I don't know what the word is, but all these hairs that are just sticking out. I may not look as good as I think I do, but I like it. I like my beard. I like the way that it now feels. I think being able to caress it in the way that I do helps me ironically think. Oh, that's the other thing though. Do not pick at your beard. That was one thing that I didn't realize is one of the most detrimental things to growing a beard is by doing this and doing that. I'm not going to demonstrate it so much, but I no longer like pick and scratch and make things happen because that actually is bad for the health of your beard. So I'm saying all this to anybody who might want to grow a beard, and I won't promote any specific product, brand name product, but I will encourage, if you are looking to grow a beard, getting some of these products, oils, balm, B-A-L-M, and a comb, a brush, caress it, take care of it, and soap, shampoo, beard shampoo. Do not use head shampoo. There are chemicals in there that do not favor your beard. There are specific products where you can get beard shampoo and you scrub it in and it's a little healthier. It's a lot healthier actually. It's made a big difference in the way that I'm able to manage and maintain the beard. So these are just some personal things. As I said, I wanted to add a little bit of a lighter note in comparison to the heavier stuff that I presented here. But I like it. I could go on about it for a long time. I don't want to take too much of your time here. Oh, and recipes. I am still encouraging people to send in recipes. However, my wife and I have now decided to be a bit healthier, to take on a little bit healthier of a lifestyle, especially because it does contribute to my beard. But for other reasons, obviously. But I think that's a side benefit, is that it does give better health to my beard. But as far as recipes, there's been some communication and feedback as far as recipes, and there was at least one that we did project. But I think with what we're going to do, I do want to provide some healthier recipes. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. I don't want to go on to that. But as for today, I encourage you guys to be aware of what may be going on for population control. whether the coronavirus or the riots that are happening. And I want to encourage you to seek out hope, to seek after God. Again, check out noslogos.org and see some of the material that's out there, some of the videos, some of the articles. And lastly, if you're growing a beard, please send me some questions or some comments, and I'd be more than happy to respond. If it's something that you've ever considered, by all means, just wanted to add a little bit light, personal touch to this. But thank you guys. God bless you, and may God bless America.
Thanks for joining us once again, and we hope you will invite your friends and family to join us in our efforts to champion conservatism for generations to come.